What's going on, everybody, and thanks for checking out another one of my videos. On today's project, I'm going to show you how I built the Hexagon Shelves / Honeycomb Shelves that you're seeing behind me. Let's take a closer look. Now, I understand this is kind of a basic project, but I think that I'm the first person to build a corner shelf like you're seeing there. I could be wrong. If you've seen one, leave it in the comment section down below, but as a trailblazer, at least in my own mind, let's get into the video. Hey, what's up guys? So to build these Hexagon shelves, what you're gonna need to do is pick up some common wood or pine, either 4 inches, 6 inches, whatever width you want, and then you're gonna need to cut it on your miter saw. Start by adjusting the bevel to 30 degrees, and then make your first cut on the board just to establish that 30-degree angle. Next, flip the board over and then mark your desired length. I went with 9 inches, and then I went and I marked it with my square before completing the second cut on the miter saw at 30 degrees. This is basically one of the 6 pieces you'll need for each shelf, and then I repeated this process again 6 more times for the first shelf, marking it at 9 inches and then cutting it with a 30-degree beveled cut. So I'm actually making 6 shelves here, so 6 shelves with 6 pieces each. So I repeated this process 36 times, and once all of them were cut, we could start working on that corner shelf. So to build the corner shelf, what I first did is I bisected the piece, so it was 9 inches total, so I marked 4.5, and then I marked with a carpenter square the 45-degree mitered cut that was gonna go in the corner. So here I am cutting that on the miter saw, and here I'm showing you that I'm gonna have to do the same mitered cut on the other side so that it meets at 90 degrees in that corner. So again, made the mark, cut it on the miter saw, and here's a look at the pieces coming together for the top. Now I'm showing you here, it's 4.5 there, 4.5 there, so you still have the overall length of the other pieces. And here I am repeating the same process for the bottom piece of the shelf, and I'm marking the middle and then going over to my miter saw and cutting it at 45 degrees on one piece, switching it over and cutting it at 45 degrees on the other, so that we're left with a 90-degree angle in the corner for both the top and the bottom. Next, sand down any jagged edges or imperfections with 120 grit sandpaper. I'm using a random orbital sander, but you can do this by hand as well. Now, before assembling these shelves, I highly recommend that you do a seal coat on the end grains of your boards because it is going to be an end grain to end grain connection. The glue tends to kind of absorb into the board. So by putting a very, very light coat of glue on and letting it dry and set up, what you're essentially doing is clogging the pores so that when you actually add more glue later on, the chances of the bond being strong is much greater. So it dries in about 5 minutes, and I highly recommend it. To actually assemble the shelf, I recommend that you put 6 pieces belly down on a flat surface, and then what you're going to do is take some painter's tape and run it along the entire length of those 6 pieces. Cut it a couple inches long on the end. Next, flip over the entire assembly, and then you're going to add wood glue in between each piece. So go ahead and apply a liberal amount. At this point, it'll kind of roll up on itself and then connect the tape in the bottom part to connect it all together. At this point, use a ratchet strap, tighten it up, and then if you have access to a brad nailer, I recommend putting 2 brad nails at each connection just for an added layer of strength. So again, repeating this process, grab your painter's tape after laying the 6 pieces belly down, flip it over, apply wood glue in between them, fold it all together, connect the piece of tape, grab your ratchet strap, run it all the way around, cinch it down, and then brad nail all of the intersections. So after repeating this process 3 more times, I moved over and started assembling the corner shelves. So I started by just applying wood glue to the mitered edge, and then I went and used clamps to hold it together before brad nailing the 90-degree angle together. And I repeated this process by putting glue in the mitered joint, attaching it together with clamps, and then actually brad nailing it together for both the top and the bottom. So once the top and bottom were put together, I started just kind of staging up what this would look like before deciding that I wanted to kind of use tape and do the same method as before. So I taped kind of one side together, put glue in between, and folded up that one side there. And then I kind of rearranged the shelf before applying more wood glue to the bottom right there and taping it into place. This was all kind of preliminary until the whole thing was put together, but then I moved over and taped the other piece, put it together, put wood glue in the joint, and then kind of connected everything together with tape to hold it in place. Once it was put together with tape, I went back and I brad nailed all the connections. So at this point, we assembled our corner shelf and all of our individual shelves, and we gave them a day to dry. Once the glue had finally set up, I came back the next day, removed the ratchet straps and all the tape, and then once all the tape was removed, I took some plastic wood filler and I filled in any of the large gaps that might have opened up in between the joints. So I put all that in there. There was a couple locations that really needed it, and then once all of that had time to dry, I went outside and I sanded down all of that excess wood filler and any other imperfection for each individual shelf. So this took a little bit of time to use the orbital sander, and then I went and I hand sanded in between the areas that I couldn't reach. Once I had sanded each one down, it was time to move over and start staining these shelves. Now, I used a weathered oak stain from Varathane, and I applied that with a cloth, and I stacked everything up right there because I thought it'd be the most efficient before moving on to kind of the inside smaller areas and polishing all that up with the stain. Now at this point, everything was stained and we were ready to start thinking about hanging these guys up. To install my Hexagon shelves, I first marked the middle of the shelf, and then I used these sawtooth hangers that I got from Amazon. I'll link them in the description, but I basically just installed them in the exact center of the top of the shelf. And then, as you're seeing, I used 2 screws and marked the location by hand before actually screwing them in with my drill. And I used 2 sawtooth hangers for the corner shelf, and obviously just 1 sawtooth hanger for the other 5 individual shelves. At this point, I used a laser level just to establish the level line across, and then after establishing my layout on the ground, I went and I installed some drywall hangers in the wall before installing some screws with a little bit of an overhang that would actually catch on the sawtooth hanger. Following this process, I used a board as a spacer in between them, installed the drywall anchor, and then installed the screw before hanging all of them up. Overall, very happy with the installation process. And one of the final steps is I picked up a bunch of random trinkets from TJ Maxx that are overpriced, but you got to. So let's take a look at the final product. Now, to supplement this YouTube channel, I have finally taken the plunge and created an Instagram. It's pretty pitiful. It's in its very early stages. I think I have 8 followers, but they're all very loyal. So if you do want to see kind of more of the day-to-day and kind of the project updates, maybe some sneak peeks of what we got going on next, feel free to follow me there. I'll leave a link for that below, but if we can get that to something maybe in the double digits, I won't be as embarrassed. So consider helping me out with that, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys.